She meant to scroll past. One tired thumb, one wrong tap, and a single burning emoji lit up under her billionaire CEO's shirtless photo at 11:47 p.m. Lena Carter froze. Deleted it. Too late. 23 minutes later, a black car stopped outside her building, and the most feared man in Manhattan finance was knocking on her door. Not to fire her, to tell her he'd been watching her for 6 months. Before we go further, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far Lena's story travels tonight. Stay with me until the end. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one ends. The radiator in apartment 4B had been making a sound like a dying animal since October, and Lena Carter had learned to sleep through it the way people in loud marriages learn to sleep through shouting. You adapted. You stopped hearing it. That was the trick to New York. She'd decided somewhere around her second winter. You either stopped hearing the city, or the city ate you alive one small inconvenience at a time. It was 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday in late February, and she was not asleep. She was lying on top of her comforter in an oversized NYU sweatshirt she'd owned since she was 19, a heating pad jammed against her lower back, scrolling through her phone with the specific kind of exhaustion that only comes after a 14-hour workday. Her laptop was still open on the kitchen counter. A half-eaten container of lo mein sat on the nightstand, the chopstick sticking out of it at an angle that would have made her mother sigh. Her mother had been dead for 3 years. Lena still sometimes set the chopstick straight, like an apology. On the screen, her thumb was moving on autopilot. Instagram. Some baby photo from a girl she'd gone to high school with. A dog. An ad for meal delivery. A real estate listing somebody had shared with zero irony. A 2-bedroom in Brooklyn for $4.2 million. Lena snorted and kept scrolling. And then there he was. Adrian Vale. She didn't follow him. She never would have followed him. She followed Vale Capital's official account because it was required of everyone in the analyst pool at Merritt Hawthorne. A kind of professional due diligence, somebody had explained on her first day, back when she was 24 and terrified and wearing a blazer she'd bought at a second-hand store in Park Slope. Adrian Vale's personal account, which had 4.3 million followers and was verified and blue-checked and run, Lena had always assumed by some kid in a PR firm, had been suggested to her by the algorithm 2 weeks ago, and she'd tapped follow without thinking because he was technically an industry figure and her boss Gina had the kind of eyes that noticed everything. So she followed him. That was the first mistake, 2 weeks ago. The second mistake was tonight. The photo had been posted 37 minutes earlier. Adrian Vale, 38 years old, founder and CEO of Vale Capital Partners, net worth somewhere north of $6 billion, depending on which magazine you believed. Adrian Vale, shirtless, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, in what looked like a suite somewhere expensive, a white towel loose around his hips, his dark hair still wet from a shower, looking at something off camera with an expression that wasn't a smile exactly. It was the look of a man who had just heard something he didn't like and was deciding calmly how he was going to handle it. The caption said, Zurich, 4 a.m., can't sleep. A Lena on her back, in her sweatshirt, with her hair in a knot and her face full of drugstore retinol, looked at it for exactly 4 seconds too long. Her thumb moved. She didn't even feel herself do it. It was the kind of accident you don't notice until the small red heart has already bloomed in the corner of the screen, and then the fire emoji has already loaded, and then the phone has already committed it, sent it, broadcast it out into the wide, cold, electric nothing of the internet, where 4.3 million strangers and one specific man could see it. For a full half second, Lena didn't react. She just stared. Then her whole body went cold. No, she said out loud, to the radiator, to the lo mein, to nobody. No, 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 no! She stabbed at the screen. The emoji was gone. She'd tapped again, once to undo it, twice, maybe 3 times because her hands had gone stupid. The fire emoji vanished. But she knew. Everybody who used that app knew. Nothing you ever did there was private. The notification had already gone through. Somewhere in some server farm in Virginia, her name, L.Carter_analyst, had already shown up on a list. She sat up so fast the heating pad slid off the bed. Okay, she said. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. He has 4 million followers. He's not going to... He doesn't even... She looked at the screen again. Her own face reflected back at her in the dark glass for a second before she unlocked it. Pale, eyes too wide, mouth open a little. A woman in the exact moment of realizing she had made a mistake. She went back to his profile. She read the caption again. Zurich, 4 a.m. That meant he was 6 time zones away. That meant he was probably asleep by now, or in a meeting, or dead, or she didn't know, she didn't care. She just needed him to not be looking at his phone. Her stomach did a slow, sick turn. It's one emoji, she said to the ceiling. People do this all the time. He gets 1,000 fire emojis a minute. He's not going to... Her phone buzzed. Lena looked at it. A DM notification. Instagram, from a verified account. Adrian Vale sent you a message. Oh my God, she said, which did not feel strong enough. She said it again. It still didn't feel strong enough. For maybe 10 seconds, she just sat there and stared at her own phone like it had grown teeth. She had, in 6.5 years at Merritt Hawthorne, never once spoken to Adrian Vale. She had been in the same ballroom as him, once, at the firm's 10-year gala, and she had watched from across a catering table as her boss's boss shook his hand and laughed too loudly at something he said. She remembered, very specifically, that Adrian hadn't laughed back. He had looked that night like a man who was tired of being in a room. She didn't open the message. She set the phone face down on the comforter. She got up. She walked, stiffly, like her joints had forgotten how, into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water she did not want. She drank half of it. She stood at her counter in her sweatshirt and bare feet and stared at the refrigerator, which had a single magnet on it, from a dentist in Queens she hadn't visited in 2 years. And she thought, very clearly, I am going to be fired. In the morning, I am going to be fired. Then she walked back to the bed. She picked up the phone. She turned it over. She opened the message. Was that on purpose? 3 words. No punctuation after the question mark beyond the question mark itself. No emoji. No ha. No LOL. No sent in error. Like a normal person would send, which just, was that on purpose? Lena read it 6 times. The cursor blinked at her from the reply box. Her thumbs hovered. Everything she thought to type sounded like a woman about to be fired. So sorry, Mr. Vale, complete accident. My phone was in my hand and No. Hi, Adrian, I apologize for... Absolutely not. Nobody called him Adrian. She was an analyst 3 tiers removed from a fund he didn't even directly own, and also she did not, in fact, know him. She typed, I'm so sorry. That was a mistake. I didn't mean to. She deleted it. She typed, sorry, pocket tap. Apologies, Mr. Vale. She deleted it. She typed finally because her hands were shaking and she couldn't think of anything else. No, I'm sorry. She stared at it for a long time. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. The little scene indicator popped up immediately. 3 dots appeared. He was typing. Lena put her hand over her mouth. The dots stopped. The dots started again. The dots stopped. For almost a full minute, nothing. And then, what's your address? Lena stood up off the bed so fast she felt the blood leave her head. No, she said, to the empty apartment. No, that's a joke. She looked at the message again. What's your address? There was no follow-up, no explanation. No, so I can send flowers? No, for my assistant to send you a gift basket to make this less weird? No, I'm kidding. Good night. Just the 3 words, and underneath them, that terrible little scene indicator showing that he was still there, still on the other end of the line, waiting. Her thumbs did nothing. Another message arrived while she was standing there. I'm in New York. I lied about Zurich. The photo is 2 weeks old. I post them on delay. Then, your address, Lena. The use of her name, her first name, went through her like cold water. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. Somebody was yelling at somebody in Spanish in the hallway. The radiator made its dying animal sound. The container of lo mein on the nightstand had gone gummy and unpleasant looking, and Lena Carter, 28 years old, second-year senior analyst, rent-stabilized, single, not dating, not sleeping, stared at her phone and thought very clearly that this was either the worst night of her life or, possibly, impossibly, the first real night of it. She typed her address. She hit send. Then she stood in the middle of her apartment with both hands pressed against her face and said, muffled through her fingers, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" 23 minutes later, the buzzer rang. Hotet. She'd changed 3 times. The first time, she'd pulled on jeans and a soft black sweater, and then looked at herself in the mirror above her dresser and said, out loud, "No, no, he is not going to think I changed for him." She'd taken the sweater off, put the sweatshirt back on, looked at herself, seen the retinol still on her jaw, scrubbed her face with a damp washcloth so hard her cheekbones went pink, looked at herself again, looked like a woman who was trying to look like she hadn't tried, groaned out loud, put the black sweater back on, kept the jeans. She was barefoot when the buzzer rang. She didn't have time to find socks. She pressed the intercom. "Yes?" "It's Adrian." Just his first name. Like they'd known each other for years. Like they'd done this before. She stood with her finger on the buzzer and didn't press it. She thought very seriously about not pressing it. About saying into the intercom, "I changed my mind. Please go, I have work tomorrow. This was a mistake." She thought about what her mother would have said. Her mother, who had worked as a receptionist for an eye doctor in Hartford for 29 years, would have said, "Lena, honey, a man like that shows up at your apartment at midnight. You do not open the door." Her mother had also been married, unhappily, for 31 of those years, to a man who had never once in his life shown up anywhere unannounced. Lena pressed the buzzer. The door clicked. She listened to the elevator. She heard it stop. She heard footsteps in the hall. All, not rushed, measured. A man who knew which door was hers and was walking straight to it. There was a knock. 3 short ones. She opened the door. He was taller than she remembered from the gala. That was the first stupid thing her brain landed on. 6'2", maybe 6'3", in a charcoal overcoat that was wet across the shoulders from a snow she hadn't noticed had started. His hair was shorter now than in the photo, darker, threaded with the first honest touches of gray at the temple. He wasn't smiling. He looked tired. He looked actually a little nervous, which she had not been prepared for at all. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. Neither of them moved. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know this is insane," she said. He nodded. "Yes." Like actively insane. Like the kind of thing you read about on a true crime podcast and go, "Why did she open the door?" "I know." "I have pepper spray," she said, which was not true. She had, at some point, in the aftermath of a bad breakup when she was 25, ordered pepper spray from Amazon, and then forgotten to use the discount code, and then canceled the order. Adrian Vale looked at her, standing in her doorway in her black sweater and her bare feet, and a muscle in his jaw moved like he was trying not to smile. "Fair," he said. "Why are you here?" He took a breath. "May I come in?" "No." The no came out before she could stop it. It sounded cleaner than she felt. She watched his face, really watched it, for the flicker of a rich man not being used to being told no. It didn't come. Instead, he nodded once, like, "Yeah, that's reasonable," and stepped back half a pace. He put his hands in his coat pockets. He looked past her, briefly, at her apartment. She knew what he saw. The lo mein, the heating pad, the cheap IKEA bookshelf packed 3 rows deep. And he didn't flinch, which she hated him for a little, because it meant he'd already decided not to. "I'll talk from here," he said, "if that's all right." "Fine. I liked your note," he said, "on the Winthrop acquisition." Lena blinked. "Last August," he said, "your team put together a diligence packet. There was a footnote, page 41, about a receivables mismatch in the Eastern European subsidiary. The fund passed on the deal because of that footnote." "That was me," she said slowly. "I know." "How do you know?" "I asked." You asked?" "Your name wasn't on the packet. I asked whose footnote it was. Gina Morrison told me." Lena's hand tightened on the doorframe. Gina Morrison, her boss, had never once mentioned it. Not in her review, not in the quarterly. Not once. "That was 6 months ago." "I know." "And you've been, what, watching me? For 6 months?" He winced a little at the word watching. She was glad. "Reading you," he said. "Your team sends up memos. I read them. For the last 5 months, I've been reading yours first. That's a very lawyer-approved way of saying watching. Yes. They stood there. The hallway light above his head was one of the cheap fluorescent ones that flickered every 90 seconds. It flickered. He didn't react to it. "Why are you here, Adrian?" she said. It was the first time she'd used his name. It felt like stepping off a curb. He looked at her for a long second. "Because you hit a fire emoji on a picture of me at 11:47 at night," he said. "And everybody in the world hits fire emojis on pictures of me, and for the first time in about 4 years, it meant something." "It didn't mean anything," she said fast. "I hit it by accident. I was half asleep." "I know." "So why?" "Because," he said. "Because you don't DM me. You don't like my posts. You don't comment. You don't ask HR for an introduction. You don't stand near me at the Christmas party. I was at the 10-year gala, Lena. You were at a catering table. I watched you the whole night. You did not look at me once." Lena felt her face get very hot. "I didn't know you noticed me," she said. "That's the problem." She laughed. It came out wrong. Too high. "This is the part," she said, "where I tell you I'm very flattered, Mr. Vale, and I really need to get some sleep because tomorrow is a Wednesday and I have 3 models due. Have dinner with me." And I... What? "Have dinner with me. Tomorrow. Anywhere you want. I'll bring my assistant as a chaperone if that helps." "You're serious?" "I'm serious. I work for your fund. You work for Merritt Hawthorne. I own a stake in Merritt Hawthorne. I do not manage you. I do not see your compensation. I will send you the conflict of interest paperwork in the morning if you'd like, and my general counsel's cell phone, and he will walk you through every clause, and if at any point you feel uncomfortable, you tell me, and I am gone." "I mean that." He said it flat. "No theater. No, you have my word. Just, I mean that." Lena opened her mouth and closed it. "Why?" she said. "Are you doing this?" "Which part?" "Any of it. This. Coming here. At midnight. Like a person in a movie." He exhaled. His breath fogged a little in the hallway. The building was old. The heat didn't reach out here. "I turned 38 last month," he said. "My father was 38 when he had his first heart attack. He was 61 when he had his last one. I went to his funeral in September. I came back from the funeral and I sat in my office for a weekend, and I thought about who I wanted to call, and there was nobody." He said it without self-pity, like he was reading it off a page. I read a memo the next Monday. The bottom of page 41 had a sentence in it that was funnier than it needed to be. Somebody had made a joke about the receivables. It said, "The timing on this feels a touch cosmic, like the company's accountant is also its astrologer." Lena felt her whole face go warm. Gina took that out. She tried. It was in the version that got to me, and I laughed out loud, and I didn't know who'd written it. And when I found out it was one of the junior analysts, He stopped. "I don't know," he said. "I started reading everything with your name on it. You're very good. You're better than the people above you know." "That's not an answer." "I know." "So what's the answer?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I don't have one," he said. "I'm a man who does not do things without a plan, and I don't have a plan for this, and my lawyer would have a heart attack if he knew I was standing in a hallway in the Bronx at 12:14 in the morning telling a woman I employ that I like her writing. You don't employ me. I indirectly employ you. Different. Correct." She almost smiled. She hated herself for it. "I'm tired, Adrian." "I know." "I have to be at my desk in 7 hours." "I know." "You should go." "Yes." He nodded once. He stepped back. He took a card out of his coat pocket, a plain white card, thick stock, no logo, just a phone number in black ink. And he held it out to her without a word. She didn't take it. He set it on the little shelf by her door where she kept her keys, next to a leaking houseplant and a stack of unopened mail. "Dinner," he said. "Tomorrow, 7. Anywhere. If you say no, I will never put you in this position again. If you say nothing, that is also a no, and I will respect it. If you say yes," he paused. "If you say yes," he said, "I will be the most careful man you have ever met." Then he turned and he walked to the elevator, and he did not look back. And Lena Carter stood in her doorway with her bare feet on the cold tile and watched him go. The elevator doors closed. She shut the door. She leaned against it. She slid down it until she was sitting on the floor. "What?" she said to the empty apartment. "Just happened." She did not sleep. At 2:14 a.m., she Googled him, which she had, in 6 years, never done. She read his Wikipedia page twice. She read a Forbes profile from 2021 and a Bloomberg profile from 2023. She read a gossip item from page 6 in 2019 that claimed he'd been briefly engaged to a French model named Camille. She read a thread on Reddit from 3 years ago where a commenter who claimed to be a former Vail Capital junior had said, "He's harder on himself than anyone else in the room, but he will not protect you. He expects you to protect yourself." At 3:02 a.m., she read a New York Times piece from November about his father's death. The piece mentioned that his father, Richard Vail, had founded a smaller investment firm in the 80s, and that Adrian had not taken the firm over when his father retired in 2007. That Adrian had started his own company instead, with nothing from his father but a loan, which he had repaid in full in 14 months. The reporter had called it a quiet kind of independence. Lena read that line 3 times. At 3:40 a.m., she read a Reuters piece from 2022 about a man named Martin Hale. Martin Hale owned a hedge fund that had, according to Reuters, lost a 9-figure bet to Vail Capital in 2019. Hale had spent, the article suggested, the 4 years since systematically building a rival position against Vail across 3 markets. In one quoted line, an anonymous source described Hale as the kind of man who keeps a list. Lena read the piece twice. She didn't know why. Something about it snagged on her. She closed her laptop at 4:11 a.m. She lay in the dark. The radiator made its sound. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the way Adrian had said, "I will be the most careful man you have ever met," and the way he'd said it like he was making a contract with himself, not her. She slept eventually, for 2.5 hours. Yet, Gina Morrison cornered her at 8:47 a.m. by the espresso machine on the 32nd floor. "You look like hell, Carter." "Thanks, Gina." "Radiator?" Radiator. Gina was 52, divorced, wore her hair in a blunt gray bob, had once, famously, made a male SVP cry in a meeting, and drank her coffee black with 2 sugars. She had been the closest thing Lena had to a mentor since her 2nd month at the firm. "Walk with me," Gina said. Lena walked. They took the corner office hallway, the one with the view of the river. Gina didn't speak until they were past the glass wall of conference room C. "Adrian Vail's assistant called me at 7:15 this morning," Gina said, in the same voice she used to ask about Q3 numbers. Lena's stomach dropped into her shoes. "To ask whether there is any formal or informal reporting line between you and Vail Capital." "Gina, there isn't. I told him there isn't. He sent me a document at 7:43 confirming there isn't. I signed it. It's on your desk." "Gina, I can explain." "Not interested." Gina turned a corner. Lena followed. "Carter, look at me." Lena looked. Gina's eyes were not angry. They were something else. Tired. Maybe concerned. "I've been in this industry for 26 years, Gina said. "I know 4 women who married up. 3 of them are miserable. The 4th one runs a nonprofit in Connecticut and doesn't answer my calls anymore." "Gina, nothing has happened." "I didn't say it was. I said be careful. Adrian Vail is a very good man by the standards of men with $6 billion, which is a low bar, which you know, because you're not stupid. What's happening to you is flattering. It is also dangerous. Not in a hitman way, in a your career way, in a your personhood way. A man like that has a gravity well, Carter. You fall in, you do not climb back out." Lena was quiet. "I'm telling you this," Gina said, "because nobody told me when I was your age, and I wish somebody had." "Okay, that's it? What else do you want me to say?" Gina looked at her for a long moment. "Just don't disappear into him, Carter. That's all I'm saying. Whatever you do, don't disappear." She patted Lena once, awkwardly, on the shoulder. Gina did not touch people, and walked back toward her office. Lena stood in the hallway for a full minute. Then she went to her desk. The document was there, a sealed envelope with her name on it, in a handwriting she didn't recognize. She didn't open it. She slid it into her top drawer. At 11:02 a.m., her personal phone buzzed. A text. An unknown number. "This is Adrian. Dinner's at 7 at a place called Arella's on 52nd. They have a back room. I've reserved it. No one will see us. If you're not there by 7:15, I'll leave, and I'll never contact you again. Either way, thank you for last night. A. She read it. She read it again. She put the phone face down on her desk. She opened her model. She stared at it without seeing it. At 11:46, she picked up the phone. She typed, "I'll be there." She hit send. Then she sat at her desk on the 32nd floor of a building she could not afford to live near, and she looked out at the river, and she thought about what Gina had said about gravity wells, and she thought about a man in a wet overcoat saying, "I will be the most careful man you have ever met." And she thought, for the first time in 3 years since her mother, about how long it had been since anyone had looked at her like she was worth being careful with. The phone buzzed. Good. That was all. Just good. Across town, on the 47th floor of a building on Park Avenue, Adrian Vale set his phone face down on a glass desk and exhaled through his nose. His assistant, Priya, was standing in the doorway. "Car for 4?" she said. "Yes." "Back entrance?" "Yes." "You want me to do the usual with the cameras on 52nd?" "Yes, thank you, Priya." Priya hesitated. "Sir?" "Don't." Sir Martin Hale's people were in the lobby of Merritt Hawthorne at 8 this morning. Unrelated meeting, supposedly. But Adrian's head came up. "Which floor?" 32nd. There was a very long second of silence. "He knows," Priya said carefully, "or he's going to." Adrian Vale, founder and CEO of Vale Capital Partners, looked out the window of his office at the gray winter sky over Manhattan, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something like fear. Not for himself. For a woman in a black sweater with bare feet who had opened her door to him at midnight and told him she had pepper spray. "Call Davis," he said. "Legal?" "Security." "Sir." "Now, Priya." She went. Adrian stood at the window a long time. The snow had started again. Down on the street, 47 floors below, people moved in small dark shapes, hurrying through weather none of them had chosen. He picked up his phone. He looked at her message. "I'll be there." He closed his eyes. "Please," he said very quietly, to no one, "be smarter than me." Then he put the phone in his pocket, and he went to find his coat. Arella's sat between a dry cleaner and a shuttered bank on a stretch of 52nd Street that most people walked past without noticing, which was, Lena understood the moment she saw it, exactly the point. The awning was a faded green. The name was written in gold letters so small you had to be looking for them. There was no host stand visible through the window, only a heavy curtain the color of red wine, and a single brass bell mounted to the doorframe at shoulder height. The kind of bell that suggested the place had been there since before anyone currently alive had been born. She stood across the street for a full 4 minutes before she crossed. She had changed twice at the office. She had, against every instinct she'd had since she was 16 years old, put on lipstick in the women's bathroom on the 32nd floor, and then wiped half of it off, and then put it back on again, while a woman from tax compliance washed her hands at the next sink and very politely pretended not to notice. She was wearing the one dress she owned that did not make her look like an analyst, a dark green wool thing she'd bought for a cousin's wedding 3 years ago, and a coat that was not warm enough for the night, and boots that she had, in a moment of panic at 5:40 p.m., stopped at a drugstore to buy shoe polish for. It was 6:58. She crossed the street. She rang the bell. The curtain moved. A man in his 60s in a black jacket opened the door. He did not ask her name. "Miss Carter," he said. "This way, please." He said it like it was a Tuesday, like he'd been saying it for 40 years to thousands of people, and none of them had ever mattered except in the way that all of them mattered equally. He led her down a narrow hallway past 3 small round tables where older couples were eating quietly, past a bar made of dark wood where a bartender was slicing a lemon with the slow care of a man who had all night, and to a door at the back that she would not have noticed if she'd been in the place alone. He opened the door. He stepped aside. He closed it behind her. Adrian was standing, not sitting, waiting. Standing, with his back to the door, looking at a framed black and white photograph on the wall of what looked like a harbor somewhere in Italy in 1962. He turned when he heard her. He was wearing a navy suit and no tie. A white shirt open one button at the collar, and the kind of watch that did not announce itself. His hair was dry this time. His face, in the warm, low light of the small room, looked less tired than it had in the hallway. He looked actually nervous again. She had not expected that to keep being true. "Hi," he said. "Hi. You came. You said 7:15. Yes, it's 6:59. I know. I didn't want to be late," she said. It came out defensive. She hated how it came out. Adrian smiled, small, real, the first real one she had seen on him. "I'm glad you're not," he said. He didn't move to pull out her chair. She registered this, the way she registered everything tonight, with the heightened attention of a woman who had decided somewhere between 4 a.m. and the bathroom mirror that she was going to pay attention. He stepped back and let her choose. She chose the chair facing the door. She didn't know why. She sat down. He sat across from her. The room was small. 4 tables, but only theirs was set. 2 candles. A single white orchid in a low glass vase. A bottle of red already open on the table, breathing. No menus. "I took the liberty," he said, nodding at the wine. "I can send it back if you'd rather something else. Or nothing. Water's fine. Whatever you want." "It's fine." "You sure?" "Adrian, I'm not going to have you send a bottle back. I'm not going to be that kind of person tonight. What kind of person do you want to be tonight?" She looked at him across the candles. "Honest," she said. "Good. Me too. Are you usually not?" "I am usually exactly as honest as I need to be to close the deal, which is not the same thing." "That's a very honest answer." "I'm trying." A waiter came. Not the one from the door. A younger one, maybe 30, who did not look at Lena's face long enough for her to read him. He set down 2 small plates of something Adrian hadn't ordered and left without speaking. "They don't do menus here," Adrian said before she could ask. "Marco just cooks. If you hate something, he makes you something else. It's the only restaurant in New York I still come to." "Why?" "Because Marco's father opened it in 1961, and Marco doesn't know who I am." Lena looked at him. "You've been coming here for how long?" 9 years. "And Marco doesn't know who you are." "Marco knows I am a man named Adrian who likes the veal. That is everything Marco needs to know. It is also, most nights, everything I want anyone to know." She didn't say anything. She picked up her wine glass. Her hand was steady. She was surprised her hand was steady. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Please." "Last night, in the hallway, you said your father died in September." "Yes." "And you said when you got back from the funeral there was nobody to call." "Yes." That's not true, is it?" "Not really. You have 4 million followers. You have... I read the Wikipedia page. You have a sister. You have a half-sister." "Yes, we don't speak." "Still, you have people. You have assistants. You have... You know what I mean. You weren't alone." Adrian set his wine glass down. "I said there was nobody to call," he said. "I meant there was nobody I wanted to call who would not, in some way, be calling me back about money. My half-sister and I last spoke in 2019 about the estate. My closest friend from college runs a firm I've invested in twice. My ex-fiancé sends me a text every Christmas that has gotten, over the years, shorter and shorter, and last year said, 'Only thinking of you, see. I have, in the professional sense, hundreds of people. I don't have..." He stopped. "I'm doing a bad job of this," he said. "No, you're not. I'm trying to say that what I said last night was not a line." "I know." "How do you know?" "Because if it had been a line, it would have been a better one." He laughed. It was a real laugh, and it startled both of them. "God," he said, "you're..." "What?" "Difficult. In a good way, I think. I'm still deciding." "You're not the first person to say that." "Your boss?" "My mother." He looked at her, and something shifted in his face. Softer, careful. "When?" he said. "She died 3 years ago. Pancreatic. It was fast. I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." They sat with it for a second. The candles did what candles do. The orchid did not move. Somewhere in the main dining room, someone laughed softly at something. "My father was a difficult man," Adrian said. Which I'm telling you not because it's relevant, but because you just told me something hard, and I don't want to be the man who takes without giving. He made a lot of money in the 80s. He lost most of it in the 90s. He made it back. He was cold to my mother. She died when I was 22. I was angry at him for that for about 15 years. When he got sick, I went to see him, and we talked for 3 hours about whether the Mets were going to fix their bullpen, and then he died 6 weeks later, and I realized I had been waiting my whole life for an apology I was never going to get. And I also realized he was a man who had done his best with what he had, and what he had was not much, emotionally. And that's the part that broke me. Not that he'd been cold, that he'd been trying. Lena looked at him. "That's not a line either," she said. "No." "Okay." "Okay." The waiter came again, some kind of pasta, thin, with a sauce she couldn't identify, but that smelled like butter and sage and something that had been cooking for 3 days. He left again. "Adrian." "Yes." "Why am I here?" "Because you said yes." "That's not what I mean." "I know." "Why are you... What is this? What are we doing?" He turned the stem of his wine glass with 2 fingers. He thought for a long moment. "A year ago," he said, "my therapist, I have one, which would shock most people who read about me, she asked me to make a list of the last 10 women I'd been involved with. I did. She asked me what they had in common. I said they were all beautiful. She said, try again. I said they all had Instagram. She said, try harder. I sat with it, and I realized..." He stopped. "I realized they had all wanted something from me. Not money. I'd have respected that more, honestly. They had wanted proximity. They had wanted the story of having been with me, and every one of them had pursued me first. Every single one. And I had let them, because it was easier. And because I am 38 years old and I am tired, Lena. I am so tired of being chased by women who do not actually see me." Lena didn't say anything. "And then," he said, 5 months ago, I read a footnote. Adrian, I'm not saying you saved me. Good, because I'm saying you didn't know I existed. You worked on the 32nd floor of a building I own part of, and you wrote a joke in a memo, and my name did not make you nervous enough to edit it out. Your boss edited it out. You didn't. And that was the first thing in a year, in maybe 5 years, that made me feel like there was still a version of my life where somebody might talk to me the way an actual human being talks to another actual human being. That's a lot of weight to put on a footnote, I know. I was going to say that's not fair. What isn't? Deciding I'm different based on a joke. You don't know me, Adrian. You've read my memos. That's not the same as knowing someone. That's the same as like reading a stranger's diary and thinking you're in love. He looked at her steadily. I didn't say I was in love with you. I didn't say you did. But you're worried I am. I'm worried you've... She stopped. She picked up her wine. She took a sip she didn't taste. I'm worried you've made me into something in your head. And I am a person, Adrian. I am not a footnote. I am a woman who lives in a walk-up in the Bronx and eats too much takeout and hasn't been on a date in 11 months because the last man I dated told me I was, quote, intimidating in a way that's not fun. I am not a story. You can't put me in a story. I know. Do you? I'm trying. She looked down at her plate. She realized she had not eaten anything. She picked up her fork. She ate a bite of the pasta. It was extraordinary, and that made her angry for a reason she couldn't name. Adrian. Yes. Who is Martin Hale? His face did something very subtle and very fast. He covered it, but she'd seen it. She'd been looking for it. Where did you get that name? Reuters. When? 4 a.m. Ah. Who is he? Adrian set his fork down. He runs a fund that took a very large loss against mine in 2019, he said. He is, to be direct with you, the closest thing I have to an enemy. He is a man who I think about more than is healthy, and who I think also thinks about me more than is healthy. He has not done anything that would justify the word enemy in any court of law. He has merely, for 4 years, competed with me and lost every time, and taken it more personally than my lawyer would like. Does he know about me? I don't know. Is that why you had me brought in the back of the restaurant? Yes. Is that why there's a car outside that I saw idling on my way in? Yes. Is the driver armed? Adrian took a long breath. He has a license to be, he said. Whether he is tonight, I have not asked. I don't ask. Lena put her fork down. She realized her hand was not quite as steady as it had been. Adrian. Yes. Am I in danger? I don't know. That's not a reassuring answer. No, it isn't. I'm not going to give you a reassuring answer, Lena. I'm going to give you a true one. I don't think anyone is going to hurt you. I think, at worst, someone might take a photograph of you, or of us. I think, more likely, nothing is going to happen tonight, because nobody knows you exist, because I have been careful. But I am telling you this because I am trying. I am trying, for once in my life, to not lie by omission to a woman I'm sitting across a table from. And the truth is that my life has a shape, and the shape has edges, and the edges are sharp, and I will not pretend they aren't. He looked at her. If you want to go, he said, go. Right now. I will walk you out the back. I will put you in a different car than mine. I will have it take you anywhere you want to go. I will not contact you again. You will keep your job. You will, if anything, be promoted, because Gina Morrison thinks you are the best analyst in the building, and she and I have a breakfast every 3 months where she tells me what her people are really worth. If you want to go, you can go. She looked at him for a very long time. You practiced that, she said. Yes. In the car on the way here. Twice. Adrian. Yes. That was a very good speech. Thank you. I'm still going to eat my dinner. He exhaled. Something in his shoulders came down half an inch. He hadn't realized she could tell he'd been holding them up. Okay, he said. Okay. They ate. For a while they just ate. Marco sent out 2 more small plates, something with squid, something with fennel, and they worked through them in a quiet that felt less like awkwardness and more like 2 people figuring out whether they could sit across from each other without performing. At some point, Adrian told her about a summer he'd spent in Greece when he was 20, and she told him about a summer she'd spent waitressing in Maine when she was 19. And he told her he'd been afraid of water until he was 9, and she told him she still couldn't ride a bike. He did not believe her. She showed him a scar on her elbow from when she was 12. How? He said. Do you not know how to ride a bike? My dad didn't teach me. My mom didn't know how. We lived on a hill. That's an excuse. It's a true one. I'm teaching you. You're not. I am. This summer, I have a place upstate. There's a long, flat driveway. I'm teaching you to ride a bike. Adrian. What? It's February. I'm aware. You're planning a summer. He stopped. He looked at her. I'm planning a summer, he said slowly. Yeah, I didn't mean to do that. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. There was a beat. You're going to make me want this, she said quietly. I know. I don't know if I'm going to let you. I know that too. The waiter came for the plates. Adrian ordered coffee, 2, espresso, which Lena did not usually drink, because she had learned somewhere along the way that saying I don't drink espresso to a man who drank espresso was the same as saying we are not compatible, and tonight she did not want to say that. She let the coffee come. Tell me something, she said. Anything. Something no one else knows. He looked at her. That's a dangerous thing to ask a person like me, he said. I know. He thought for a while. He drank some coffee. He put the cup down. When I was 17, he said, my father took me to a fight, a boxing match, Atlantic City. There was a man on the undercard, an older guy, maybe 41, 42, who'd been fighting his whole life and was never going to be anybody. My father had bet against him. The guy won. My father lost $8,000. On the drive home, I said to my father, I feel bad for that guy. And my father said, don't. He's been preparing for that fight his whole life. Tonight was the only night of his life that mattered. Most men don't get one of those. And I thought about that I've thought about that for 21 years. Because my father was telling me something about himself. And I didn't hear it until he was dead. He was telling me he hadn't had a night like that. He was telling me he was the guy who bet against it. Adrian. Yes. Do I what? Do you want a night like that? He looked at her across the candles for a long, slow moment. I want a life like that, he said. I'm tired of nights. Neither of them spoke for a while. The waiter came back. He said something quietly to Adrian. Adrian nodded. The waiter left. It's 10:30, Adrian said. I didn't realize. Oh. I told myself I wouldn't keep you past 10. It's okay. I'll walk you out. Okay. He paid. She didn't see him pay. She only noticed that at some point there was no check and no waiter, and Adrian was on his feet, pulling on his coat, and she was pulling on hers, and Marco himself had appeared in the doorway, a short, wiry man in his 60s, with flowers still on the side of one hand. And Marco said, in a thick accent, You come back, Adrian. Bring her. I will, Marco. She eats nice, not like the other ones. Lena laughed. She couldn't help it. Marco grinned at her, a little gap-toothed, and went back to his kitchen. They went out a different door than the one she'd come in. A service door, down a hallway past the kitchen, into a narrow alley where a black car was waiting with its lights off. A man in a dark coat stood next to the car, not quite at attention, not quite at ease. He nodded at Adrian. He did not look at Lena. Davis, Adrian said, this is Miss Carter. Miss Carter, Davis will take you home. Davis, the Bronx address. Yes, sir. You're not coming? I'm going a different way. Why? Because if anyone followed us here, they followed me, not you. And I don't want to lead them to you. Lena stopped with her hand on the car door. Adrian. Yes. That's not a normal thing to say. I know. Is this what it's like all the time? Some of the time. Jesus. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just... She stopped. She looked at him. The snow had started again, small, lazy flakes that were landing in his hair. Just tell me you're not going to disappear. He looked at her for a long second. I'm not going to disappear, he said. Okay. I'll call you tomorrow. Okay. She got in the car. Davis closed the door behind her, gently, like closing the door on an infant. She watched through the window as Adrian stood in the alley, alone, with the snow in his hair, and lifted one hand in a small, almost shy wave. Then he turned and walked the other way, toward 53rd, and was gone. The car pulled out. Davis did not speak for the first 12 blocks. At Columbus Circle, he said quietly, without looking at her in the mirror, Miss Carter. Yes. I don't know what he told you. Some of it. You should know. He's a good man. Okay. I've worked for him 7 years. I've seen him do things that most men in his position wouldn't. I've also seen him... Davis stopped himself. He shook his head once. I've also seen him be lonely in a way I don't think he knows he is. Lena didn't answer. She looked out the window at the city going by. At the light at 96th and Broadway, she said, Davis? Yes, Miss Carter. How likely is it that somebody is following this car right now? Davis was quiet for a beat. We're clean tonight, he said. I checked twice. But in general, Miss Carter, it depends on the week. She nodded. She didn't ask anything else. At the corner of her block, Davis stopped the car. He got out. He came around to her side. He opened her door. He walked her to her building. He waited while she unlocked the lobby. He did not go up with her. He said, Good night, Miss Carter, and waited on the sidewalk until she was inside the elevator, and only then did she see him, through the lobby glass, walk back to the car. In her apartment, she did not turn on the overhead light. She took off her coat and hung it up. She took off the dress and folded it carefully on the chair. She put on the NYU sweatshirt. She stood at her kitchen counter in the dark for a while, drinking a glass of water, and she thought about a man in an alley with snow in his hair saying, I'm not going to disappear. And she thought about Gina in the hallway saying, Don't disappear into him. And she thought about how the two sentences had, now, become a kind of math problem she was going to have to solve. Her phone buzzed. A text. Adrian. Home? She typed, Yes. A pause. Then, Me too. Thank you for tonight. She looked at the message for a long time. Then she typed, but before she could stop herself, before she could make it sound smarter or cooler or more measured than it was, Thank you for being honest with me. She hit send. He replied in under 10 seconds. It was the easiest part of my whole day. She put the phone down on the counter and she put her hands over her face, and for the first time in a long time, Lena Carter smiled into her own palms in a dark kitchen and didn't try to talk herself out of it. 3 miles south, in an office on the 47th floor of a building on Park Avenue where the lights should have been off for 6 hours, a man named Martin Hale was sitting at his own desk, looking at a photograph on his own phone. The photograph had been taken 43 minutes earlier from a car parked across the street from a restaurant called Arella's on 52nd. It showed the service door in the alley. It showed Adrienne Vale, in a navy suit, standing in the snow. It showed the back of a woman's head as she climbed into a black car, dark hair, a green coat, and in her hand, briefly visible, a single small detail that his people would, by morning, have traced to a specific analyst on the 32nd floor of Merritt Hawthorne. Martin Hale looked at the photograph for a long time. He did not smile. He did not frown. He picked up his phone. He made a call. He said 3 sentences into it. He hung up. Then he turned the photograph face down on the desk, and he poured himself 2 fingers of a very expensive scotch, and he drank it slowly, the way a man drinks when he has just decided something he knows he will not undo. Outside, over Manhattan, the snow kept falling, small and steady and patient, the way snow falls on a city that has already made up its mind to be cold. The snow did not stop for 3 days. It was the kind of New York snow that did not commit to being pretty, not the fat, televised kind that made the skyline look like a snow globe, but a thin, gritty, sideways snow that turned the sidewalks into slush by noon and froze them into brown ice by nightfall. Lena walked to work through it for 3 mornings in a row and felt, each time, like a woman carrying a secret that was starting to leak through her coat. Adrienne called. He called the way he'd said he would, the day after Arella's, at 7:48 in the evening, while she was standing at her kitchen counter eating a grocery store salad out of the plastic container. He didn't say, "Hey." He said, "Did you eat today?" And she said, "I'm eating now." And he said, "What?" And she said, "A salad." And he said, "From where?" And she said, "The Whole Foods on Columbus." And he was quiet for a second and said, "That's not dinner, Lena. That's a hostage situation." And she had laughed, standing there in her kitchen in her work clothes with a plastic fork in her hand, and something in her chest had loosened in a way she was not prepared for. That had been Thursday. By Saturday, they had been on the phone for somewhere north of 11 hours in total, spread across 4 calls, and Lena had started to understand that Adrienne Vale, on the phone, was a different man than Adrienne Vale in a restaurant. In person, he was careful. On the phone, he was funny. He did impressions of his own general counsel, of a pompous British banker named Reginald, who had once tried to insult him in a meeting, of Marco the chef. And he did them well enough that she had laughed. On Friday night, hard enough to choke on a sip of water. He'd said, on the other end, "Don't die, Carter. I'm not legally allowed to be the reason for it." And she had said, wiping her eyes, "Why do you call me Carter sometimes?" And he had gone quiet and then said, "Because when I call you Lena, I want things I don't have the right to want yet." She had not known what to do with that. She had sat on her bed in the dark for 20 minutes after they hung up, with the phone still warm in her hand, and tried to locate the exact moment in her life where this had started to be real. On Sunday, he sent a car, not for her, for dinner. He'd asked on Saturday night whether she'd let him send her dinner instead of a plastic bowl of arugula, and she had said, "Adrienne, I don't want you buying me things." And he had said, "Lena, it's pad thai. Let me send you pad thai. It's not a mink coat." And she had, after a moment, said fine. At 7:10 on Sunday evening, a man she didn't recognize buzzed her apartment and handed her a brown paper bag with 2 containers of pad thai and a small folded note that said, in a slanted, efficient hand, "Eat the spring rolls first. They go soggy." Hey, she ate the spring rolls first. She sat on her bed and ate them with her fingers, and she looked at the note on her nightstand, and she thought, this is the part where I should be scared. She wasn't scared. That was the part that scared her. On Monday morning, Gina Morrison was standing by Lena's desk at 8:11 a.m. with 2 coffees in her hand. "Walk with me." "Gina, I just got in." "Walk with me, Carter." Lena walked. Gina led her past the elevators, past the kitchen, past the hallway that led to the executive washrooms, and into a small glass-walled conference room on the corner of the floor that nobody booked because the heating vent was broken and it was always either freezing or 90 degrees. This morning, it was freezing. Gina closed the blinds. Sit down. Am I fired? No. Lena sat. Gina set both coffees on the table. She slid one across. She sat. She looked at Lena over her own cup. A man named Martin Hale, she said, called the firm on Friday afternoon and asked to buy me lunch. Lena's stomach went cold. Gina. I did not take the lunch. I told him I was in meetings through the end of the quarter. He said, perhaps coffee. I told him I don't do coffee with competitors. He laughed and said, I'm not your competitor, Gina. I'm Adrian Vale's competitor, and he and I have an analyst in common. Those were his exact words. Lena did not answer. He then asked me, Gina said, whether I thought Lena Carter was on track for VP this year. I asked him why he cared. He said he had heard good things. That was the end of the call. It lasted 4 minutes. Gina, I am not your mother, Carter. I am not going to tell you what to do. I will tell you this. A man like Martin Hale does not call a firm he does not own to ask about a 28-year-old analyst unless he is planning to do one of 3 things. He is planning to hire her, he is planning to use her, or he is planning to ruin her. And in the 7 years I have been watching Martin Hale do business, I have never once seen him hire anybody he liked. Lena closed her eyes. Does Adrian know? He knows as of 7:22 this morning. I called him myself. He was, to his credit, already awake. What did he say? He said, thank you, Gina, and then he said a word I will not repeat in this conference room, and then he hung up. Gina. Yes. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing this. To the firm. To you. Gina set her coffee down. She looked at Lena for a long moment. Her face was unreadable in the way that only a 52-year-old woman's face can be unreadable. Not hiding anything, exactly, just layered thick enough with every other face she'd ever worn that you had to earn the right to see through it. Carter, she said, you didn't bring anything to this firm. You walked into an elevator one day 6 months ago, and a man who already owned the building decided to notice you. That's not your fault. That is the opposite of your fault. What I said to you in the hallway last Wednesday, I still mean. Don't disappear into him. But I also want to say, and I am going to deny I ever said this if you repeat it. She paused. He called me on Friday night, Gina said. Late, 11-something. He was on a speakerphone in a car. He asked me 2 questions. The first was whether I thought you were going to be okay if things got ugly. The second was whether I would consider it a personal favor to him if I kept an eye on you in a way that did not make you feel watched. Nobody has asked me a question like that in 25 years of Men with Money, Carter. Nobody. I told him yes to both. Lena stared at her. He asked you that. He asked me that. He didn't tell me. No, he wouldn't, which is, for whatever it's worth from an old woman, the first real data point I have on him as a man and not a balance sheet. Lena put both of her hands flat on the table. Gina, I don't know what to do. I know. I've known him for 6 days. I know. This is insane. Yes. What do I do? Gina picked up her coffee. She took a long sip. She set it down. You figure out, she said, what you're willing to lose. You figure out what you're not, and then you act like a person who knows the difference. That is all any of us ever does, Carter. That is all there is. Gina stood up. At the door, with her hand on the handle, she paused. One more thing. Yes. If Martin Hale's office calls you directly, and he will, eventually, Carter, he will, you do not pick up. You do not take a meeting. You do not accept a coffee. You call me. You call Adrian. You call the security desk. You do not engage. Are we clear? Yes. Good. Gina walked out. Lena sat in the cold conference room for another 6 minutes. She did not drink her coffee. She looked at her own reflection in the dark glass of the window, a small, tired, pale-faced woman who had, a week ago, been somebody nobody was watching at all. She thought, Gina is a good person. She thought, Adrian is asking people to keep me safe without telling me. She thought for the first time about whether safe was something that was going to stay a word she could use about her life. At 11:14 that same morning, her work phone rang. Unknown number. She did not pick it up. It rang again at 11:22. She did not pick it up. At 11:40, a calendar invitation appeared in her inbox. It was from an assistant at a firm called Hale Brothers Capital. Subject: Introductory coffee. Mr. Hale requests the pleasure. Body: Wednesday, 7:30 a.m., The Carlisle. Mr. Hale looks forward to meeting you. Lena looked at the invitation. She did not click decline. She did not click accept. She did not click anything. She forwarded the email to Gina, and then, after a 3-second hesitation, she forwarded it to Adrian's personal address, the one he had given her on Saturday night with the note, "Use it only if you need to." Adrian called her 20 seconds later. "Do not go." "I wasn't going to." "Do not go, Lena." "Adrian, I wasn't." "Listen to me. I need you to listen to me. He does not want coffee. He wants a photograph of you sitting across from him. He wants it for the same reason he has been circling me for 4 years, which is that he does not know how to beat me on the numbers, and he has decided to beat me on the story. Do you understand?" "Yes." "You do not sit across from that man. Not for coffee, not for anything. Not ever." "Okay. Promise me." "I promise you." There was a long pause on the line. She could hear him breathing, a little uneven, the way he breathed when he was trying not to let her hear him be angry. "I should have seen this coming," he said. "Adrian, I should have been more careful." "You were careful. Davis is exceptional. Davis is not the problem. The problem is that Martin Hale has 80 people working for him, and one of them is apparently paid to sit outside Arella's at 9 on a Wednesday night, and I did not account for that because I have been—" He stopped. "Because you have been what?" "Because I have been letting myself want this." Lena sat back in her chair. She looked at the ceiling of her cubicle. "Adrian, yes, I am not a glass thing." "I know. I want you to stop talking about me like I am a glass thing. I'm a grown woman. I did my own background checks on you at 4 in the morning. I have walked through this city alone for 6 years. I'm not going to break because somebody at Hale Brothers sends me a calendar invite." There was a silence. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just tell me what's actually happening. All of it." "No more. I will be careful. No more Davis checked twice." "What does this man actually want from you?" Adrian took a long breath. "He wants a piece of leverage he can use against me in the Greer industrial deal," he said. "Greer is an old family manufacturing conglomerate in Pennsylvania. Hale has been trying to buy it for 3 years. So have I. The family trusts neither of us, but they are going to sell to one of us by June because their patriarch is dying and his kids are not speaking. If Hale gets a piece of me, anything, Lena, anything that makes a headline, anything that embarrasses me, anything that makes the Greer board nervous, the family sells to him. That is $900 million. He will burn every bridge he has ever built to win that deal. He will certainly burn you. You, to him, are free kindling. So what do we do?" "I do not know yet." "Adrian, I do not know yet, Lena. I am telling you the truth. I am in a car on the way to Davis's office right now. I will have something for you by tonight. Will you have dinner with me?" "Yes." "Not Arella's." "Okay." "My apartment." A beat. "Okay," she said. 8. "I'll send a car." "Adrian?" "Yes." "I don't want a car. I want to take the train." "Lena, I want to take the train. I have been taking the train for 6 years. If I start not taking the train because of Martin Hale, then Martin Hale has already won something. I want to take the train." Another long pause. "Davis will be on the platform," he said. "You will not see him. He will not speak to you. He will just be there. Can I have that?" "Yes." "Thank you." 8. She hung up. She sat at her desk for a while. Then she opened her model, and she worked, properly worked, for 4 straight hours, on a valuation she had been putting off for 2 weeks. Because she had learned at some point in her 20s that when the rest of your life got loud, the only way through was to make one small thing quiet. Her phone did not ring again that afternoon. At 6:45 p.m., she walked to the subway. She did not see Davis. She saw a man in a navy jacket reading a newspaper on the opposite platform who did not turn a page once in 4 minutes. She decided, after a little while, that this was probably him, and then she decided that she was going to stop looking. Because if she kept looking, she was going to start seeing him everywhere, and that was not a way to live. She got off at 68th. She walked the 4 blocks east. Adrian's building was not what she'd expected. She had expected, stupidly, she realized, standing in front of it, glass, a tower, something on the cover of a magazine. What she got was an old limestone pre-war on a quiet side street, 6 stories, no sign, a single uniformed doorman behind a small desk, and a lobby that smelled like furniture polish and old money in a way that felt strangely comforting instead of intimidating. The doorman, a wiry older man with a white mustache, looked up as she came in. "Miss Carter?" "Yes. Mr. Vale is expecting you, top floor. The elevator will take you directly up." "Thank you." "Miss Carter?" "Yes?" "You are the first guest he has had in this building in 2 years." She didn't know what to say to that. "Okay," she said. "I only mention it," the doorman said gently, "because he told me to tell you." She rode the elevator up. It opened directly into his foyer. There was no hallway. The apartment took the whole floor. Adrian was standing by the window when she walked in. He was in a gray Henley and dark jeans, barefoot on the hardwood, and he was holding 2 glasses of red wine, and behind him, through the tall windows, the city was spread out in its whole dumb, gorgeous, snow-lit sprawl. He looked like a man who had been standing there for 15 minutes, rehearsing being relaxed. "Hi." "Hi." He handed her a glass. "Davis says you did a terrible job of pretending not to see him on the platform." "Davis is a snitch." "Davis is very loyal. He told me because he was proud." She laughed, a little, in spite of everything. She stepped out of her boots by the door because the floors were so clean she did not want to be the one who scuffed them. She took the wine. She walked to the window. The view was of the park, black and white and endless. She could see her breath on the cold glass. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you. You don't deserve this view." "I know. Nobody does. This is obscene. I know that too." She turned around and looked at him. "Adrian?" "Yes." "What are we doing tonight?" He set his glass down. He wiped his hands, once, on the front of his jeans, a small, unguarded gesture she had not yet seen from him. "I'm going to feed you," he said. "I made, or I will be honest, my housekeeper made, and I am going to warm up. A roast chicken. And then I'm going to tell you about the security arrangements I have put in place around your apartment, which you are going to hate. And then I'm going to tell you about a plan I have to end this with hail in the next 6 weeks, which you are also going to hate, but for different reasons. And then, if you still want to be in the same room with me after all of that, I'm going to ask you whether you are my girlfriend, because I am 38 years old, and I do not have time to be cool about this, and I would like to know." Lena stared at him. "Adrian." "Yes. That's a lot." "I know. You're very bad at pacing yourself." "I know that too." She took a long sip of wine. She set the glass down on the window ledge. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" "Okay. Feed me. Tell me about the security. Tell me about Hale. And then ask me your question." He exhaled. She had the very satisfying feeling of watching a man relax by half a degree. "Fair," he said. Dinner was, as promised, a roast chicken, on a small dining table in a kitchen that was too big for one person and was clearly never used by one. He apologized for the kitchen. She told him to stop apologizing. He told her about the security, 2 new cameras on her block, paid for by a nonprofit he had arranged to donate to that morning so the building's board would approve them without asking questions. A new deadbolt on her apartment door, if she would permit it, and a security professional named Renee, a woman, he emphasized, not a man, who would, if Lena agreed, ride the train with her to and from work for the next 6 weeks, dressed in a way Lena would not recognize and never speak to her. Lena listened. "That last one is too much," she said. "Lena, it's too much, Adrian. It is. I am going to take the train. I am not going to be followed by a woman who is paid to pretend not to know me. I cannot live that way. I will start to hate you." He looked at her for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" "Yes. The cameras stay. The deadbolt stays. Renee stays off the train. Just like that. Just like that. You said no. This is a thing I am going to have to get used to, and I am going to get used to it now. She looked at him across the table. Thank you. You're welcome. Tell me about Hale. He took a breath. I'm going to call him, he said. Tomorrow, at 3 in the afternoon. I'm going to tell him that I know he sent you a calendar invitation. I'm going to tell him that if he contacts you in any way again, you specifically, Lena, personally, I will sell my short position against his Brazilian holdings at a loss before the end of the quarter and route the funds into a long position on his direct American competitor. And I will make sure every journalist on my list knows I did it. That will cost him, at a minimum, $40 million. And more importantly, his reputation as a man who cannot be intimidated. If I do that to him publicly, the Greer family sells to me in April. And he knows it. What? And if he contacts me anyway, then I do it. $40 million. Yes. Adrian. Yes. That is not a proportionate response. I know. That is not a reasonable thing to do to another human being over a calendar invitation. I know. That is... Lena, listen to me. He did not send the calendar invitation because he wanted coffee. He sent the calendar invitation because he wanted to see if I would flinch. If I do not flinch, he escalates. If I escalate first, he stops. That is the only language this man understands. And I would rather spend $40 million now than spend the rest of our lives together, watching you look over your shoulder. Lena stopped with her fork halfway to her plate. The rest of our lives together. He paused. I am getting ahead of myself again. Adrian. Yes. Ask me your question. He set his fork down. He looked at her across the table. His face did something she did not have the vocabulary for yet. It was not a smile. It was something closer to a flinch that had decided, at the last minute, to be brave. Will you be my girlfriend? He said. I know. It is an absurd word for a man my age. I do not have a better one. Yes. Yes? Yes, Adrian. Just like that. Just like that. He laughed, once, quietly, like the laugh had been waiting in his chest for a week. Okay. Okay. After dinner, they did not watch a movie. They sat on a couch by the window. They talked. He told her about his sister, the half-sister he had not spoken to since 2019, and about how she had 2 children he had only met in photographs, and about how he was lately thinking of writing her a letter. He told her he was afraid the letter would sound like an apology, and that he was not sure yet what he was apologizing for. She told him about her father, about how he had left when she was 14, about how he had died 3 years before her mother in a car accident in Arizona with a woman Lena had never met and would never meet, about how she had not cried at the funeral and had cried alone in her childhood bedroom 3 months later for reasons she still could not fully name. He listened. He did not fix it. He did not offer to fix it. He just listened, with one hand open on the couch between them, palm up, not reaching for her, just available. At some point, maybe an hour in, she put her hand in his. He did not say anything. He just closed his fingers around hers, carefully, like he was closing a door on a quiet room. At 10:30, Davis called. Adrian answered on speaker. Sir? Yes. Martin Hale just called my personal cell. Adrian's whole body went still. And he asked me to pass on a message. What? He said, and I am quoting him, sir, he said, tell Adrian I am not interested in the girl. Tell him I'm interested in the girl's mother's grave. He said, Adrian's hand tightened around Lena's so hard she made a small sound. He said, tell him I know where it is, and I know who paid for it, and I know it was not her father. That was the entire message. Then he hung up. There was a silence. Lena's face had gone very pale. Adrian did not look at her. He was looking at the phone on the coffee table. Davis? Yes, sir. Who paid for the headstone? There was a long, long pause on the line. Sir, Davis said carefully, I am not the person to answer that question. Who is? I think you are, sir. Adrian closed his eyes. Lena pulled her hand back from his, slowly. Not violent, not angry, just back. Adrian. Lena. Adrian, what is he talking about? Adrian opened his eyes. He looked at her. His face, for the first time since she had met him, was the face of a man who had been caught. 6 months ago, he said very quietly, after I read your footnote, I had your file pulled. A standard file. Background, address, next of kin. Your mother's obituary was in the file. It mentioned the cemetery. It also mentioned that the family had set up a small fund to pay for the plot, because your father's estate was... There was nothing there. I saw the fund. I saw the amount. I saw that it had run out of money 2 years ago. I saw that the cemetery had sent 3 notices to an address that was no longer yours. He stopped. Adrian, I paid it off, the whole plot, in perpetuity, through a foundation, under a name that is not mine. I did it in September, 3 days after my father's funeral, when I had just read another one of your memos, and I was... Adrian, I was alone, Lena. I was alone, and I read your footnote for the 4th time in a week, and I wanted to do one thing for one person, and I could not give you a raise because it would have gone through 3 HR systems, and I would have been caught, and Adrian, I paid for your mother's grave, yes, I did. There was a silence. In the silence, somewhere in the city, a siren went by. The refrigerator hummed. The radiator did not make a sound because this was not that kind of apartment. Lena stood up from the couch. She walked to the window. She stood with her back to him for a long time. Lena. She did not turn around. Lena, please. You didn't tell me. I know. You said, at dinner, at Arella's, you said you were trying not to lie by omission. I know. And you had already... I know, Lena, I know. She turned around. She was not crying. Her face was not doing anything, which was worse. How dare you, she said quietly. Lena, how dare you touch my mother? How dare you touch her grave without asking me? How dare you make a decision about the dead without the person who had to bury her? I know. Don't say I know. Stop saying I know. Tell me why. Adrian stood up. He did not come toward her. He stayed by the couch. Because, he said, I had a father I never said the right thing to, and I thought, if I could pay for one woman's mother to have a stone that did not get moved by a cemetery for non-payment, then I could... He stopped. I wasn't, he said. I wasn't doing it for you. That is what I am trying to say. I did not know you. I did it for me. I did it because it was the only thing I could think of that had your name on the paperwork and not mine, and I needed, at that moment in my life, to do a thing that was not about me. Lena was silent. And I know, he said, that does not make it okay. I know I should have told you. I was going to, Lena. I was... When? I don't know. Soon. When? I don't know. Was it going to be before or after I said yes to being your girlfriend, Adrian? He didn't answer. That's what I thought, she said. She walked past him. She picked up her boots by the door. She sat down on the bench by the foyer, and she pulled them on, slowly, with her hands shaking a little, the way hands shake when they are doing something the rest of the body has not yet agreed to. Lena, I'm going home. Let Davis... I'm taking a cab. I don't want Davis. I don't want anybody. I'm going home. Lena, please. She stood up. She looked at him. I am not angry that you did it, Adrian, she said. I want you to hear me. I am not angry that you paid for my mother's grave. I think, somewhere, maybe when I am not standing in your apartment with a man named Martin Hale, using her name as a weapon, I will be grateful. I am angry that you did not tell me. I am angry that you let me sit at Arella's last Wednesday and tell you I wanted to be honest, and you were already carrying this. I'm angry that you made me a kind of project before you ever let me be a person. And the worst part is, I don't know how much of us is you choosing me, and how much of us is you still trying to pay your father back for something he is never going to be alive to accept. She stopped. He did not try to stop her. She opened the door. At the threshold, she paused. Call him, she said without turning around. Martin Hale, tomorrow. Do the thing. Spend the money. And this. Lena. And Adrian. Yes. Do not come to my apartment tonight. Do not have Davis follow me. Do not send anyone. Do not send food. Do not send flowers. Give me 3 days. 3 days. 3 days. Okay. She closed the door behind her. The elevator ride down was very long. In the lobby, the doorman with the white mustache looked up. His face was kind. She could not look at it. She walked past him into the cold and did not stop walking until she was 4 blocks away, and her hands were so cold she could not feel them, and only then did she raise a hand for a cab and get in and tell the driver an address in the Bronx and put her forehead against the cold window, and finally, quietly, in the dark, let herself cry. 47 floors up and 3 miles south, a phone buzzed on a glass desk, and a man named Martin Hale smiled at the dark for the first time all week. 3 days was a long time when you were trying to decide who you were going to be on the fourth one. Lena did not go to work on Monday. She called in at 6:02 a.m. while it was still dark outside and the cab receipt from the night before was still balled up on her kitchen counter, and she told Gina she had a stomach thing. Gina did not ask questions. Gina said, in a voice that suggested she already knew more than she was saying, "Take the week if you need it, Carter. The models can wait." And Lena had said, "I don't need the week, I need today." And Gina had said, "Fine, drink water." So, and hung up. She did not drink water. She lay in bed until 11. She stared at the water stain on the ceiling that had been there since she moved in, and that she had, for 6 years, told herself she would eventually call the super about. She thought about her mother. She thought for the first time in a long time about the actual hour of her mother's burial, about how it had been October and raining, and how the man from the cemetery had asked her, very gently, at the graveside, whether she wanted a few minutes alone, and how she had said no because she was afraid that if she said yes, she would never leave. She thought about how, 2 weeks after the funeral, she had gotten a bill in the mail that she could not pay, and how she had called her aunt in Hartford, and her aunt had said, "Honey, your uncle and I, we can do a little. We can do a little, Lena." And how she had said through her teeth, "Don't, I'll figure it out." And how she, at 25 years old, had not figured it out, had just stopped opening the mail from the cemetery, had moved apartments twice, had let the notices chase a forwarding address they would never find. She had not visited the grave in 2 years. That was the thing nobody in the city knew about her. Not Gina, not her aunt, not the 2 or 3 women she sometimes got drinks with. She had not been back since the second anniversary. She had told herself it was because she was working. She had told herself it was because her mother would not have cared. She had told herself 100 things, and none of them had been the real one, which was that she was ashamed of the bill, of the silence, of the way grief had made her smaller instead of bigger, of the way she had learned in her 20s to convert every difficult feeling into a spreadsheet she could close at the end of the day. She lay in bed on Monday morning and understood, finally, what Adrian had touched. He had touched the part of her life she had not been brave enough to touch. That was why she had walked out. Not because he had overstepped, he had, but mostly because he had seen. At 11:47, she noticed the time, because of course she noticed the time, a small bitter joke with herself. She sat up. She took a shower that was too hot. She got dressed in clothes that did not belong to any version of herself anyone at her office would recognize. Jeans, a thick wool sweater that had been her mother's, boots, a gray knit hat. She packed a bag with a thermos of coffee, a book she would not read, and a bouquet of white tulips she walked 3 blocks in the slush to buy from a Korean grocery on Gun Hill Road. She took the Metro North out of Grand Central at 1:04 p.m. She got off an hour and 20 minutes later in a small Connecticut town she had not been to in 2 years. She took a cab from the station. The driver, an older man with a radio playing a country song, did not ask where she was going until they were inside the gates, and then he only said softly, "Which row?" "Section D. I'll walk from here." "You sure, miss? It's cold." "I'm sure." He let her out. She walked the gravel path with the flowers against her chest. She found the stone. It was clean. That was the first thing she noticed. Clean, in a way her mother's stone had not been the last time she had seen it. There was no moss along the base, no dead leaves in the letters. The engraving, Margaret Ann Carter, 1958 to 2023, beloved mother, was as sharp as the day it had been cut. Somebody had laid a small wreath of evergreen at the base, not fresh, but not old either. Maybe 3 weeks old, maybe 4. It had a small white ribbon tied around it that had no name. Lena stood there for a long time. She set the tulips against the stone. She sat down eventually in the cold, wet grass, her coat spreading around her, her breath white in the air. She had not planned what she was going to say. She had thought the words would come. They did not come. She sat for almost 20 minutes before she spoke, and when she did, it was not what she had expected. "There's a man, Mom." She said it very quietly. "He did something stupid," she said. "He paid your bill, without telling me. And I got mad and I walked out on him. And then I came here, and somebody's been clearing your stone, so I guess I know who." She laughed, small, not really a laugh. "I wanted you to meet him. That's stupid, I know. You wouldn't have liked him. You wouldn't have trusted him. You would have made him sit in the kitchen and drink bad coffee, and you would have asked him what his people did for a living, and he would have had the wrong answer, because his people did money, Mom. And you always said men who did money did it because they couldn't do anything else. And I would have rolled my eyes at you, and you would have rolled your eyes back, and—" She stopped. Her throat closed. "I don't know what to do," she said. I am falling for a man I have known for a week, and I am angry at him. And I am also, Mom, I am also the kind of grateful that scares me, because I did not have the money, and I did not have the courage to ask for the money, and I did not have the courage to come back here for 2 years, and somebody came for me, and I don't know what to do with that, because nobody has ever come for me before. You didn't even get to. You were the one who was supposed to, and you were sick, and I had to come for you. And when you were gone, there was no one left whose job it was to come for me." She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I want to let him," she said, to the stone, to the cold, to the evergreen with its unsigned ribbon. "I want to let him come for me. I don't know how. I don't know how to do that without losing the part of me that learned how to do all of this alone. Because the part of me that learned how to do it alone, that's you, Mom. That's what you gave me. And I don't want to give it back." She sat with it. She sat with it for a long time. Then she stood up. Her knees hurt. Her jeans were wet through at the calves. She put her hand on the top of the stone, just for a second, and she said, not to her mother, not really, just to herself, "Okay." She took the train back to the city in the dark. Somewhere around Stamford, she took out her phone and typed a message to Adrian. She wrote it. She deleted it. She wrote it again. She deleted it. She wrote it a third time, short, and she did not delete it. "Tomorrow. My apartment. 7 p.m. I will feed you this time." She hit send. The reply came in 11 seconds. "I'll be there. Thank you." She put the phone face down on her thigh. She watched the dark towns go by through the window of the train, and she thought, this is the part where, if I am smart, I will turn around and run. And she thought also that she was tired of being the kind of smart she had been for 6 years. On Tuesday, she went to work. She worked an ordinary day. She wrote an ordinary memo. Gina walked by her desk at 3:14 and said nothing, only set a paper cup of tea on her desk and kept walking. Lena drank it. At 6, she stopped at a small Italian grocery on Arthur Avenue and bought 2 pieces of fish, a head of fennel, a bottle of wine that cost more than she had intended, and a loaf of bread she had to carry under her arm because her bag was full. She walked home in the cold with her nose running and her hands red, and her plan, such as it was, forming itself sentence by sentence as she climbed the stairs to apartment 4B. She cleaned the apartment, not frantically, just with intention. She scrubbed the counters. She changed the sheets even though she knew, with absolute certainty, that he was not going to see them. She wiped the water stain on the wall behind the toilet. She put the lo mein container, which had impressively still been on the nightstand, in a state she did not wish to examine, into the trash, and she put the trash in the hallway chute. She lit 1 candle on the kitchen table, which was an actual IKEA card table covered with a linen cloth she had found in the back of a drawer, and she thought, this is absurd. He lives in a pre-war on the park. He does not need a candle, and she left the candle. At 6:52, the buzzer rang. She pressed it. At 6:54, there was a knock at the door. She opened it. Adrian was standing there in a black wool coat with the collar up against the cold, holding a grocery bag in one hand and a small bouquet of white peonies in the other, which was absurd because it was February in New York, and peonies did not grow in February in New York, and she made a mental note to be angry about that at a later date, because at this specific moment, looking at him in her hallway with snow on his shoulders and an expression on his face that was very carefully not hopeful. In case hope was the wrong thing, she did not have the energy to be angry. Hi. Hi. I brought bread. I didn't know if I have bread. Of course you have bread. Come in. He came in. He took off his coat. He set the peonies on the counter. He looked around the apartment, really looked, for the first time, because on Wednesday night he had not come inside. And she watched him do it, the way his eyes moved over the bookshelf, the small framed photo of her mother on the windowsill, the heating pad, which she had, in a small final mercy to herself, hidden in the closet. His face did not change. He did not react to the size of it. He did not react to the peeling paint on the radiator. He only stopped at the photograph. This her. Yes. She has your eyes. Other way around. Right, yes, sorry. He turned from the photograph. He looked at her. Lena. Wait. Okay. I'm going to say some things. You're going to let me say them, and then you can say whatever you need to say. Okay? Okay. Sit. He sat. At the card table. In his charcoal sweater and his dark jeans on a folding chair in a one-bedroom in the Bronx. It was a sight she was going to remember for a long time. She did not sit. She stood at the counter and she poured 2 glasses of wine and she kept her hands busy, and she said it without looking at him. I went to my mother's grave yesterday, she said. Okay? It was clean. The stone. There was a wreath. It wasn't mine. I'm assuming it was mine. I had somebody. There's a service. I'm sorry. I should have told you about that too. I know. Lena, let me finish. Okay. She set 1 glass in front of him. She kept the other. She did not sit yet. She leaned against the counter with both hands. I was angry on Sunday night, she said, for 2 reasons. The first was that you made a decision about somebody who belongs to me without asking me. That one, I'm still a little angry about. I am not going to pretend I'm not. But it is the kind of angry I can put down. It is not the kind of angry I have to carry. Okay? The second reason is bigger. Okay. She took a breath. I was angry, she said, because you did something for me that I should have done for myself, and you doing it made me see that I hadn't. And I have been doing that, Adrian. Not doing things I should be doing for 2 years, maybe 3. I did not visit her. I did not pay the bill. I did not call my aunt. I did not live, really. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner out of a container. I told myself I was surviving, and I called it a life. And you walked in, and in 6 days, you showed me exactly how much of my life I had been pretending was fine. Lena, I'm not done. Okay, that is not your fault. That is not a thing I get to be mad at you for. That is a thing I have to be mad at myself for. And I have been, Adrian. I have been mad at myself for 3 days, and I have decided I am going to stop. He was quiet. So here's what I am telling you, she said. I am not going to punish you for seeing me. I'm not going to walk out a second time. But I'm also not going to be fixed by you. I am not going to be a woman you paid a bill for. I am going to pay you back for my mother's plot. I will do it in installments, because I cannot do it at once, and I know that is a drop in your ocean and probably an insult. But it is not for you, Adrian. It is for me. I need you to let me. He looked at her for a long moment. Okay, he said. You agree. Yes. Just like that. Just like that. You're not going to fight me on it. Lena, the first time I met you, you told me you had pepper spray. I am a slow learner, but I am a learner. If you need to pay me back in installments to be able to look me in the eye, you will pay me back in installments. I will set up an account. The wire instructions will be on your phone in the morning. You can send $1 a month if you want. You can send the whole thing tomorrow. You can send nothing. It is your decision. Thank you. You're welcome. She sat down. She had not realized she had been standing the whole time. She took a sip of the wine. It was her grocery store wine, and it was exactly as mediocre as she had paid for it to be, and he drank his like it was the best thing he had ever had. Adrian? Yes. There is a third thing. Okay. I want to meet your sister. His face did something small. My half-sister. Yes. Lena. You said you were going to write her a letter. You said you didn't know what it was going to say. I think you should write the letter. I think you should have her over to that absurd apartment of yours. I think you should make her sit in your kitchen and drink bad coffee. And I think I should be there. Not because I have any business being there, but because I think you have been alone with certain parts of your life for a long time. And I am telling you, I, specifically, am telling you that you do not have to be alone with them anymore. He looked at her across the card table. His eyes were wet. He did not wipe them. He did not pretend they weren't. He let her see. Okay. Okay? Yes. Just like that. Lena, I don't know if you have noticed, I am not a man who says no to you about very many things. She laughed. It came out wet. She wiped her own face with the back of her wrist. Good. Good. They ate. She had pan-seared the fish badly. She knew she had pan-seared it badly. The skin was not crisp enough and the flesh was maybe a minute past done. And he did not say a word about it. He ate it. He said it was perfect. She called him a liar. He said, "It is not perfect fish, but it is the best meal I have had in this city in 11 months, because I am eating it at your table, and that is a thing I did not think I was ever going to get to do." And she had to put her fork down for a second, because her throat had done a thing it had not expected to do. After dinner, they did the dishes together, which he was bad at. He rinsed everything too fast, and half of the plates had to be washed twice. She found this endearing and did not tell him so. He asked her about the bookshelf. She told him about every book on it that had mattered to her in her 20s. He listened like a man taking notes for a test. At 10 p.m., she walked him to the door. He did not try to kiss her. She noticed this. He had his coat on and his hand on the door, and he had turned to say goodnight, and he had not moved toward her. He was waiting. She was the one who stepped forward. She put her hand flat against his chest, over his coat, over the place where she could feel, faintly, through the wool, his heart. She looked up at him. "Adrian?" "Yes, I'm going to kiss you now. Not because you earned it. Not because I forgive you for everything. Not because I am fixed. Because I want to. Is that okay?" "Yes. Please." "Yes." She kissed him. It was not the kind of kiss that went anywhere. It was short. It was careful. It was the kiss of two people who had, for 6 days, been standing on opposite sides of a fence, and had finally agreed on which side was theirs. When she pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. His eyes were closed. "Thank you." "For what?" "For coming back." "I didn't go anywhere, Adrian. I needed 3 days." "I know. Thank you anyway." He left. She closed the door. She leaned against it. She pressed both of her hands flat against the wood. She did not slide down it this time. She stood. Wednesday, Adrian called Martin Hale at 3 p.m. on the dot. Lena was not in the room for it. She was at her desk on the 32nd floor, and she knew it was happening only because Adrian had texted her at 2:58, making the call. "Wish me luck. I love you," which I am not allowed to say yet, but which is true. And because Gina had walked past her desk at 3:11 and quietly said, "Whatever he just did, it's working. Hale's people are pulling out of the Greer social calendar for the quarter." "How do you know that, Gina?" "I have breakfast with a woman who used to work for Hale. Do not ask." Lena did not ask. That night Adrian came to her apartment again, and this time he told her the whole thing. How he had called Hale's private line, how Hale had laughed when he answered and called him by his first name like they were old friends, how Adrian had listened to the laugh all the way through and then said, very quietly, "I'm going to say this once, Martin," and how he had said, in 5 sentences, what he had promised he would say, and how, on the other end of the line, Hale had gone very quiet, and then said, in a voice Adrian had never heard him use, understood, and had hung up, "That was it. That was it. No threats back." No, he knows. He knew before I called, honestly. The call was so he could tell his board I had called. Now he has a reason to walk away from Greer without losing face. He'll take a win somewhere else this year. He's a patient man. But he'll leave me alone. He will leave you alone. He will leave your mother alone. He will leave your job alone. I have it in writing from his general counsel as of an hour ago. I will forward it to your lawyer. I don't have a lawyer, Adrian. I know. I hired you one. Her name is Patricia, and she is excellent, and she works for you, not me, and I will not see her bills. She is a gift. You are allowed to yell at me for it, or you are allowed to use her. Your choice. Lena looked at him for a moment. I'm going to use her. Good. I'm still going to yell at you a little. Also fair. 2 weeks passed. The snow gave up. The sidewalks started to dry. The city did the thing it did every year in late March, where it pretended for 3 days that it was not going to be cold anymore, and then punished everybody for believing it with a surprise freeze. Lena got promoted, not because of Adrian. He had, as promised, recused himself completely from the firm's operations around her name, but because Gina had, for 18 months, been writing memos about her that Lena had never seen, and because the comp committee had, that quarter, run out of reasons not to. Lena found out on a Friday. She took Gina out for bad martinis at a place on 56th. Gina had 3. Gina never had 3. At the end of the night, Gina said, Carter, if he does not marry you by the end of next year, I will fire him from your life personally. And Lena, who had known Gina for 6.5 years, put her hand on Gina's hand for 1 second, which was the most touching the two of them had ever done. And Gina said, do not make this weird, and paid the check. In April, Adrian wrote the letter to his sister. He wrote it at Lena's kitchen table on a Sunday morning in pen on an actual piece of stationery. He wrote 4 drafts. He read the 3rd one out loud to her. He said, is this mawkish? She said, yes, send it anyway. He sent it. His sister, her name was Caroline. She was 34. She lived in Philadelphia. She had 2 kids and a husband who was an orthopedic surgeon, did not reply for 6 days. On the 7th day, she sent back a letter of her own. It was 2 pages. It said, among other things, I have been waiting for you to do this for 15 years. Come for Easter. Bring her. They went. Caroline's house was a brick row house on a quiet street with a little front yard and a magnolia tree that was just starting to bloom. Her husband, Brian, tall, soft-spoken, shook Lena's hand for 2 seconds too long out of nervousness, opened the door. The 2 kids, a girl of 7 and a boy of 4, stared at Adrian from behind their father's legs, like he was a rumor that had finally walked in. Caroline came out of the kitchen in an apron, wiping her hands on a towel. She was taller than Adrian had said. She had his eyes. She looked at him for a long second in her own foyer, and then she walked across the wood floor in her socks, and she hugged him, hard, without saying anything. And Adrian, who had negotiated a 9-figure deal across a phone line in a voice like concrete 2 weeks earlier, Adrian held on to his sister and did not let go for a long time. And Lena, standing in the doorway with a pan of rolls in her hands because she had insisted on bringing something, turned her head and pretended to look at the magnolia tree. Easter dinner was loud. The 4-year-old, whose name was Henry, spilled his milk twice. The 7-year-old, whose name was Ava, made Adrian hold a stuffed rabbit during grace, which Caroline led, briefly and gently and without any of the language Lena had braced for. Brian told a long story about a patient who had broken his ankle on a unicycle. Adrian laughed hard enough that Caroline stared at him for a second and said, I haven't seen you laugh like that since you were 12. And he said, I haven't felt like this since I was 12, Carrie. And Caroline got up from the table and went into the kitchen and did not come out for 3 minutes. After the kids were in bed, Caroline and Lena did the dishes in the kitchen while the men sat on the porch with a whiskey. Caroline washed. Lena dried. For a long time, neither of them spoke. You know, Caroline said eventually, he told me on the phone last week that he thinks he is going to marry you. Lena's hand stilled around the glass. He did. He did. We have known each other for 9 weeks. I've been married to Brian for 11 years. I decided I was going to marry him in 9 minutes. Lena laughed a little. He's not easy, Caroline said, scrubbing a plate. My brother. I want to tell you that. Nobody has probably told you. He is very kind, and he is very smart, and he is very loyal, and he is also, Lena, he is also a man who has spent 38 years earning the approval of a dead man. It does not just go away because he had a moment. He is going to disappoint you. He is going to make decisions without asking you. He already has. Caroline looked at her. He paid for my mother's grave. Ah, Caroline said. She went back to scrubbing. That is so him. I walked out. I came back. Good. Keep walking out when you need to. Keep coming back when you can. That is the job, Lena. That is the actual job. Lena dried a glass. Thank you. For what? For having us. Your family. I'm not. You are. Stop. You are. They finished the dishes. On the porch, the men were talking quietly about something. Through the kitchen window, Lena could see the back of Adrian's head, his hair a little longer than it had been in February, a little more silver at the temples than it had been a month ago. She could see the way his shoulders sat differently than they had the first night she had met him. Lower, looser. The shoulders of a man who had decided, at some point in the last 9 weeks, to stop holding his whole life up by himself. That night, driving back up to the city in the dark, with Adrian at the wheel, he had insisted on driving. He did not let Davis drive on holidays. He had told her this as if it were an ordinary thing. Lena put her hand on the inside of his right knee and left it there, and he put his right hand over hers, and they did not talk for the whole stretch between Trenton and Newark. And it was the first silence she had ever sat in with another person that did not feel, somewhere inside it, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. Somewhere around exit 14, he said, without looking at her, I'm going to ask you something. Not tonight. Not this month. Soon. Okay? I wanted you to know. Adrian. Yes. I already know my answer. He glanced at her. You do. I do. Are you going to tell me? No. I am going to make you ask. He laughed, a real one, a tired, happy laugh. Fair, he said. They drove on. The lights of Manhattan came up ahead of them, small and gold and ordinary, the way the skyline of a city looks when you have, finally, stopped being afraid of it. He asked her in June, not in the way she had, at various points in the preceding 6 weeks, half braced for. Not in the obscene apartment with candles on every surface. Not on a helipad. Not in Paris. Not in any of the ways that a man with a net worth north of $6 billion might, if he were a worse man, choose to ask a question like that. He asked her on a Tuesday evening in her own kitchen, while she was standing at the stove stirring a pot of tomato sauce she had made from a can and a jar of basil, because she had worked until 7:30 and he had been there, on her couch, with his shoes off and his tie pulled loose, reading the FT and waiting. He walked up behind her. He put his hands on her hips lightly, the way he had learned to do. Not in a way that presumed, only in a way that asked. She leaned back against him. She did not turn around. Lena? Marry me. The wooden spoon paused over the pot. She did not turn around. She did not move. You said you were going to ask me, Adrian. That wasn't asking. Will you marry me? That's better. Is that a yes? She turned around. She was still holding the spoon. There was tomato sauce on her wrist. Her hair was in a clip. She had on yoga pants and one of his old t-shirts. She looked at him for a long moment, and she saw him, really saw him. A 38-year-old man in a kitchen too small for him, with a ring in his pocket that she knew he had been carrying for at least a week because she had seen him pat the same jacket pocket 4 separate times in the preceding 48 hours. Checking. She said, yes. Just like that. I told you in the car, in April. I already knew. You are the one who decided to make a production of it. I did not make a production of it, Lena. We are standing in front of a pot of marinara. Exactly. Minimal production. I appreciate that. He laughed. He pulled the ring out of his pocket. It was not what she had expected. She had expected, on the 1 or 2 occasions she had let herself imagine it, something large and cold and a little hostile. What he had was small, an old-cut diamond in a plain gold band, a setting that looked like it had been made before either of them was born. It was my grandmother's, he said, on my mother's side. She left it to Caroline. Caroline sent it up in April. She said, her exact words, in a note. She said, take this, and if you ever lose Lena because you were stupid, I will come up there personally and take it back. I like Caroline. I know you do. She put the spoon down. She let him take her hand. He slid the ring on. It was slightly too big. She did not mention it. He noticed it, and his face did the thing where it almost apologized for something he had not yet done, and she said, before he could, Adrian, stop. We'll size it. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Then she put her arms around his neck, and he put his arms around her waist. And neither of them said anything for a long moment. And on the stove behind them, the sauce began to stick to the bottom of the pot in a way that was going to be very annoying to clean later, and in that moment, neither of them cared. The sauce burned. They ordered pizza. They ate it on the couch, the ring catching the light every time Lena picked up a slice. And Adrian, who had eaten at the best restaurants in 4 countries, said, around a mouthful of lukewarm pepperoni, that it was the best meal of his life. They got married in October. Not in Manhattan. Not in one of the hotels that Adrian's assistant Priya had. In the week after the engagement, emailed Lena a list of with an apologetic note that said, "He asked me to put together options. Please ignore this if you hate all of them. I will not tell him." Lena had read the list, the Plaza, the Pierre, a converted bank on Madison, and she had written back to Priya, "Thank you, but no." And she had brought it up with Adrian that same night, and what she had said was, "I want to get married at the place upstate, the one you said you would teach me to ride a bike at. I want it small. I want Gina there, and my aunt, and Caroline, and Brian, and the kids, and Davis, and Priya, and that is it. I want it to not be a picture in any magazine. I want to wear a dress that my mother would not have called ridiculous." Adrian had looked at her for a long time, and he had said, "Okay." And then he had called Priya and told her to cancel the list. The place upstate was in the Catskills. He had bought it 6 years earlier, a farmhouse with 20 acres around it, and for 6 years he had spent, by his own confession, fewer than 40 nights there. The driveway was long and flat, just as he had described it, and in August, in the 3rd month of their engagement, on a weekend when the sky had been a blue so pure it almost looked fake, he had taught her how to ride a bike on that driveway. She had fallen 4 times. The last time she had skinned her knee badly enough to need a bandage, and he had cleaned the wound himself sitting on the front porch with her leg across his face serious in a way that was entirely out of proportion to the wound. And when he was done, she had said, "Adrian, it's a scrape." And he had said without looking up, "I know. I just haven't gotten to take care of anyone in a very long time, and I would like to be good at it." She had not said anything for a little while after that. They were married in front of the farmhouse on the 3rd Saturday of October, under a maple that was burning red at the top and still green at the bottom, by a judge who had known Caroline's husband since law school. There were 31 people there. Gina Morrison, who had taken the train up and was wearing a gray suit and dark sunglasses against the afternoon light, cried openly and without apology during the vows, and then pretended at the reception that she had a sinus thing. Lena's aunt from Hartford, who had not flown on a plane in 15 years, had driven up with her husband and their golden retriever and had, upon arrival, walked slowly around the whole farmhouse with a critical expression on her face before turning to Lena and saying, "Honey, your mother would have hated this man's money, and she would have loved this man." Caroline's daughter Ava, now 8, held the rings. Henry, now 5, did not hold anything, because Caroline had learned from experience what Henry could and could not be trusted with at a formal event. Lena wore a dress that was not a wedding dress. It was an ivory silk slip with a long jacket over it, simple, something she had bought at a sample sale in Soho in July for $240 after trying on and rejecting 14 more expensive things. Adrian wore a navy suit and no tie. They did not write their vows beforehand. They had agreed that they would each say one true thing, as short or as long as they needed, and they would trust themselves to find the words in the moment. Lena went first. She said, "Adrian, I want to tell you what I promise. I promise I am going to keep being a person. I am going to disagree with you. I am going to take the train when I want to take the train. I am going to pay for half of things, always, even when it is absurd. I am going to come for you the way you have come for me. I am going to make you tell me the truth. And when I'm wrong, I'm going to listen. And when I'm right, I'm going to say so. I'm going to love you when it is easy, which it has already been more than I expected. And I'm going to love you when it is hard, which we both know it will be. I'm going to stay." He went next. He spoke very quietly, and the wind almost took some of it, but everyone there heard what they needed to hear. He said, "Lena, I want to tell you 2 things. The first is that when I met you, I was a man who had been alone for so long that I had started to mistake loneliness for character. I thought it made me serious. It did not. It was only making me smaller. You have made me bigger, not by changing who I am, but by making it safe to be who I am. The second thing is harder. I want you to know that I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be proud when I should apologize. I'm going to try to fix things that are not mine to fix. I'm going to, sometimes, confuse taking care of you with controlling you, and I am asking you, in front of everyone here, to tell me when I do it. I am promising you, in front of everyone here, to listen when you do. I love you. Thank you for letting me try. They kissed. Caroline cried harder than anyone there, including the bride. Ava dropped one of the rings and had to chase it across the grass for a distance of about 4 feet, which got a laugh, and which made the whole thing, in memory, feel less like a ceremony and more like a gathering. At the reception, under a white tent with small lights strung across it, Davis danced once with Priya, and then twice with Gina. Brian got a little drunk and told 3 different people that he had never, in 14 years of knowing his brother-in-law, seen him laugh as much as he had that week. Lena's aunt sat with Caroline for an hour and talked about nothing in particular, 2 women who had, between them, survived a lot of things, and who understood each other without having to say so. At one point, very late, around 11, when most of the older guests had gone back to the inn down the road and the tent was quiet, Lena found Adrian standing by himself at the edge of the property, looking out at the dark field. She walked up behind him and slid her hand into his back pocket in a way that she would not have done 10 months earlier, and he did not startle. He had learned her. He knew her step. Hi. Hi, wife. Don't. I have been waiting all day to say it. Say it once more, and then stop for a week. Wife. Okay, done. He turned. He looked at her. I want to tell you something. Okay? Martin Hale sent a gift. She blinked. He what? Not for the wedding. He doesn't know about the wedding. He sent it to my office last Tuesday. An unsigned card. A bottle of scotch. The card said, in typed letters, "Congratulations on the Greer deal. You were the better man for it. M.H. Adrian. I had the scotch tested. It was just scotch. Adrian. I know. It is a strange thing. I told Davis. I told my security team. I am telling you now. I do not think he is going to be a problem again. I think, and I realize this is a hopeful thing, and you may laugh at me. I think a man loses a fight badly enough. He goes home and reconsiders his life. I think maybe he has. Or he is playing a longer game. Yes, I thought of that too. My security team is not going away. Davis is not going away. You will always be safe, Lena. I am telling you this because I promised you I would not carry things alone anymore. I did not carry this alone. I told you the day I opened the package. You did. I did. Thank you. You're welcome. They stood for a little while. Somewhere back in the tent, Henry, who should have been in bed, was playing with a sparkler that Brian had almost certainly not sanctioned. Adrian. Yes. We are going to have such a strange life. I know. Are you ready for it? No. Good. Neither am I. He laughed. He pulled her against him. She put her forehead on his collarbone, which was a thing she had learned sometime in the summer, was the exact height where her forehead wanted to go. They stood there for a little while longer, and then they went back to the tent, because Ava was asking for Lena, and because Gina had cornered Brian about a tax question, and Brian's face, even from across the lawn, looked like it needed rescuing. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Greece, which was, Adrian admitted on the plane, a selfish choice on his part, because he had wanted to take her to the island he had spent a summer on when he was 20, and he had wanted to see whether it would be as good with her in it as it had been without her. It was. She burned her shoulders on the second day, badly, and he rubbed aloe onto them every night for a week with a patience that was, she had started to understand, simply the shape of how he loved, not grand, not visible, only there, in the small repeated gestures that almost nobody ever saw. On the flight home, somewhere over the Atlantic, she leaned her head on his shoulder and said, I want to talk to you about something. Okay, I want to keep working. I assumed. I want to be clear, Adrian. I want to keep working, not part-time, not a consulting thing. I want to keep being an analyst. I want to get to VP, and then I want to get to director, and then I want to be Gina in 15 years. And I want to do it without anybody at that firm ever believing it was your money. I want that more than I want almost anything. And I want you to promise me you will let me have it. He looked at her for a long moment. Okay. Adrian, Lena, I promise. I knew this about you before I ever took you to dinner. I will not help. I will not introduce. I will not mention your name in any room. If someone asks me about you, I will say, she is my wife, and she is better at her job than I am at mine, and she did not need me to do any of it. I will get out of your way. Thank you. You're welcome. Also, also what? I want to buy my own apartment with my money. Not ours. Mine. Okay. Not to live in. I'm going to live with you. I am saying I want to have somewhere. A place that is only mine, that I paid for, that has my name on the deed. Not because I am planning to leave, Adrian, because I am planning to stay, and I need to know that the staying is a choice. He was quiet for a second. Okay? Just like that. Lena, yes. Buy the apartment. Buy it with your money. Put only your name on the deed. I will not set foot in it unless you invite me. If you never invite me, I will not ask why. That is the actual easiest yes I have given you all year. She closed her eyes. I married a good man. You married a lucky man. Both. Both. They landed at JFK at 5:14 a.m. Davis met them at the curb. It was November. The city was gray and raw and smelled like a hot dog cart 3 blocks away, and Lena stepped out of the car with her ring on her finger and her sunburn peeling in patches under her coat, and thought, this is the life. This is the actual life. This is it. She went back to work on a Monday. Nobody at the firm made a thing of it. The ring got noticed at the coffee machine. 2 women from the tax floor congratulated her. Gina, walking past her desk at 9 a.m., muttered, if you come to me with a single feelings problem in the next 2 weeks, I am going to push you out of this window, which was the closest thing Gina had ever said to I am so happy for you, and Lena took it the way it was meant. At 10:40, she got an email from Adrian's personal address, no subject line. The body said only, the apartment on 87th, Studio 1.2. On the market this morning. I am not bidding on it. You do not have to bid on it. I'm just telling you it exists. She looked at it for a long time. She did not reply. At 12:30, on her lunch break, she walked 2 blocks and called her lawyer, Patricia, who she had, as promised, been using for 8 months. Patricia picked up on the second ring. It's Lena. Hi, Lena. I want to buy an apartment. I want you to make the offer. I do not want the offer to have my husband's name anywhere on it. Okay? Can we do that? We can do that. Send me the listing. I'm sending it. Okay. Patricia. Yes. Am I being weird? No. Okay. She got the apartment in January. She did not move into it. She furnished it. A bed, a desk, a chair by the window, a single small bookshelf. And she kept a key in her wallet, and she went there sometimes for an afternoon, and read, and sometimes did not read, and sometimes just sat. Adrian never came. He did not ask. One day in February, almost exactly a year after the fire emoji, she texted him from the apartment and said, come up if you want. I want to show you something. He came. He sat on the one chair by the window. She sat on the bed. They drank tea out of mugs she had bought at a thrift store on Amsterdam. They did not talk about anything important. He left after an hour. He did not ask for a key. She gave him one anyway, 2 weeks later, taped to a note that said, for emergencies. I love you, L. He never used it. That, she understood later, was a kind of love also. The first year of the marriage was not easy. She wanted people to know that later, when younger women at her firm, there were more of them by her 3rd year at VP, would sometimes ask her shyly, over coffee, what it was like to be married to someone like him, and she would always answer the same way. She would say, it was not easy. The first year was hard. We had 3 real fights. One of them lasted for 5 days. And they would look at her like they had not expected that answer, and she would say, listen, if anyone ever tells you that love like this is a soft thing, they are selling you something. Love is not soft. Love is a decision you make 900 times, on days when it would be easier not to make it. It does not feel like floating. It feels like staying. It feels like sitting down across a table from the same person after you have hurt each other and saying, I am here. Are you? That is all it is. That is all it has ever been. They had their first real fight in March about his mother's piano. He had had it moved into their apartment, the pre-war on 68th, where she had moved in mostly by that point, though she still kept the studio, without telling her. She had come home from work to find it in the living room, a dark, glossy upright, and she had walked past it into the kitchen and set her bag down very carefully and stood with her hands flat on the counter for a full minute. And when he had come in behind her, smiling, wanting to show her, she had turned around and said, Adrian, We said. We said we would make decisions together about the apartment. You said. He had not understood at first. It was only a piano. It was his mother's piano. He had been moving it out of a storage unit he had been paying on for 17 years. He had thought it was a good surprise. She had said, "It isn't about the piano, Adrian. It is never about the thing. It is about the fact that you still, after a year, default to doing the big thing alone and then showing it to me. I am not a person you show things to. I am a person you ask." He had gotten angry. This was the part she wanted the younger women to hear. He had gotten angry because he was a man, and because no one likes to be told they have failed in a way they thought they had solved. He had said a thing about her being too quick to see control where there was only love, and she had said a thing about how a man who had grown up with his father did not get to pretend he did not know the difference, and they had gone to bed without speaking, and she had slept, for the first and only time, in the studio on 87th. She had come back in the morning. He had not called. He had not texted. He had not sent Davis. He had done the one thing he had, in their whole relationship, finally learned how to do. He had waited. She had walked in at 7 a.m. He had been in the kitchen, in yesterday's clothes, having clearly not slept. He had looked at her, and she had looked at him, and he had said, "I should not have bought the piano without you. I should not have spoken to you the way I spoke to you last night. I'm sorry. I'm going to get better at this. I'm asking you, again, to help me." And she had said, "Okay." And then she had made coffee, and they had sat at the kitchen island, and they had talked about the piano for an hour, and at the end of the hour they had agreed to keep it, because it had been his mother's, and because Lena had come to understand, over the course of the hour, that he was not asking her to accept a piece of furniture. He was asking her to let him carry something of his mother into the life they were building, and that was, in fact, a thing a wife could say yes to. She played the piano, badly, for the rest of their lives together. He never played it at all. He only listened. Their son was born in the spring of the 3rd year. They named him Thomas, after no one in particular. They had argued, briefly, about naming him after Adrian's father, and Lena had said gently but firmly, "I do not want to give a baby a name that carries a debt." And Adrian had looked at her for a long moment and said, "You are right. You are right. Thank you for saying that out loud." And they had chosen a name that belonged only to the boy. Thomas was born at 4:11 in the morning at Mount Sinai, after a labor that was long and unglamorous, and during which Lena, at one particularly bad point, looked at her husband and said, through her teeth, "This is your fault." And Adrian, who had been told by every book he had read in the preceding 9 months that the correct response to this was to agree, said instead, quietly, "I know. I know. I am so sorry. I love you." And Lena, in the middle of a contraction, started laughing, which is how, for the rest of their marriage, every time things got bad in any small way, one of them would look at the other and say, "This is your fault." And the other would say, "I know." And they would both remember the birth of their son, and the moment would pass. Gina was one of the first people to meet the baby. She came to the apartment 2 days after they brought him home, in a gray suit with a stuffed giraffe that she handed to Lena without a word. And she sat in the rocking chair by the window and held Thomas for 37 minutes. And when she finally handed him back, she said, in a voice a little rougher than usual, "Carter, this is very embarrassing, but I'm going to be this child's godmother, and I will not be taking questions." Caroline came up from Philadelphia with a hand-knit blanket. Ava, at 11, insisted on holding the baby herself, with a seriousness that made Adrian leave the room because he did not want his niece to see him cry. Henry, at 8, asked whether the baby came with a return policy and was removed from the vicinity of the baby for the duration of the visit. Davis, who by then had worked for Adrian for 11 years, knocked on the door of the apartment on the 4th day after they came home. He did not come in. He stood in the doorway with a small wrapped box and said, "Mrs. Vale, for the boy, from my wife and me." And Lena, who had, over 3 years, gotten him to stop calling her Mrs. Vale in almost every context, had let him call her Mrs. Vale that one time, because she understood what he was saying. She opened the box later. It was a silver rattle. Engraved on it, in small letters, was the date they had first driven away from Morella's in a black car with its lights off. She kept it. When Thomas was 6, Lena made director at the firm. She took him with her to the office the morning of the announcement, in a small navy blazer Caroline had sent up for his first-grade picture day, and he sat in Gina's office and drew on a legal pad while his mother was congratulated by people she had been working alongside for 11 years. Gina handed him a stapler and told him, gravely, that the stapler was the most important tool in the building. Thomas believed her. He talked about Gina's stapler for months. That night, at dinner at home, Adrian raised his glass of water. He had stopped drinking quietly, sometime in Thomas's second year. After one bad night, Lena did not discuss with anyone outside the marriage, and he said, "To my wife, who is now the most senior person at her firm without my last name, and will, in 3 more years, be the most senior person at her firm, including people with my last name, because there are none, because I have kept my promise." Dad. Yes, Thomas. Is Mom the boss? Your mom is the boss, yes. Are you the boss? Of a different thing. Who's the boss of you? Your mother. Okay. Thomas went back to his spaghetti. Lena, across the table, looked at her husband and at her son, and at the kitchen she had by that point renovated twice, and at the picture of her own mother that still sat, 11 years after she had first brought it into the apartment, on a small table by the window, and she thought, this is what it was all for. Not the money, not the building, not the ring, not even Adrian, exactly. Though Adrian, always Adrian, the specific man, the specific shape of him in a doorway, the specific weight of his hand on the small of her back in a crowd, the specific sound of his laugh when Thomas said something weird at dinner. It was the thing underneath all of that. It was the ordinary life. It was the kitchen. It was the stapler. It was the spaghetti sauce. It was the fact that a woman who had, at 28, opened her apartment door to a man she was terrified of in the middle of the night, had at 34 become a woman who did not flinch when the front door opened in the evening because she knew whose step it was, and she knew he was coming home, and she knew, in the particular way you can only know things that have been tested, that he was coming home to her. The world, for what it was worth, did not end. Martin Hale lost a different deal in 2029 and retired quietly to a house in Palm Beach, from which he occasionally sent Christmas cards addressed only to the Vales, which Adrian read carefully and then put in a drawer without replying. Vale Capital grew, and then stopped growing, because Adrian, in the year Thomas started school, announced to his board that he was going to start spending 3 days a week at home, and that anyone who had a problem with that was welcome to take it up with his wife, who he assured them would not be moved. No one took it up with her. Gina retired in 2033 and moved, to everyone's surprise, to a small town on the coast of Maine, where she adopted 2 enormous dogs and wrote emails to Lena roughly once a month in a tone that was exactly identical to the tone she had used in conference rooms in Midtown for 30 years. Lena replied to every one. She missed Gina the way you miss a person who taught you how to be the version of yourself you ended up being. Not every day, but in flashes, often at the office, often when something was hard. Caroline's kids grew up. Ava went to medical school. Henry turned out to be a musician, of all things, which nobody had seen coming and which made Adrian laugh in delight every time it came up, because, he said, it was the first real evidence he had ever had that a family could reinvent itself. Lena's aunt in Hartford died in 2031. Lena went to the funeral, and she took Thomas, and she took Adrian, and when it was over, she drove the 3 of them the 40 minutes to the cemetery in Connecticut where her mother was buried. She had not been back in a long time. The stone was still clean. The wreath had been replaced. Thomas, who was 8, asked her if she was okay. She said, "Yes, honey, I am okay." And she meant it. On the ride home, in the car, she said to Adrian, quietly, so Thomas, asleep in the back seat, would not hear. "Adrian? Yes. I want to say something. I've been thinking about it." "Okay." "When you paid for her stone, that night I walked out of your apartment. Do you remember what I said to you?" "I remember everything you said that night." "I said I didn't know how much of us was you choosing me and how much was you trying to pay your father back." "Yes. I want you to know. I know the answer now." "Okay. It was all of it, Adrian. Both. You paid my mother's bill because of your father. You came to the hallway of my apartment at midnight because you were lonely. You read my footnotes because you were tired. None of it was pure. None of it was just for me. I spent a long time, Adrian, being angry that I was not a reason by myself. And then one day, I don't know, Thomas was maybe 3. I realized I had never loved you purely either. I loved you because you saw me. I loved you because you paid attention. I loved you because I was tired of the men who did not. I wasn't pure either. Nobody is. And the thing I want to tell you, okay. The thing I want to tell you is that it doesn't matter. All the reasons we came to each other, they don't matter. Only what we did after matters. Only the staying. I wanted you to know that I have stopped keeping score. He did not answer for a long moment. Then he reached across the console without taking his eyes off the road, and he found her hand. Thank you, Lena. You're welcome. And that was the real ending. If anything has a real ending. Not the wedding, not the baby, not the promotion, not the first night he knocked on her door. Just a car on a highway, somewhere north of Hartford, with their son asleep in the back, and a woman telling her husband, I have stopped keeping score, and a man saying thank you, and the two of them driving the rest of the way home. Sometimes a mistake is not a mistake. Sometimes it is the door your whole life had been waiting for you to find. A woman hits a wrong button at 11:47 p.m., and she thinks it is the worst night of her life. And 6 years later, she is sitting at a kitchen table listening to her child call a stapler a treasure. You do not get to choose the door. You only get to choose after whether to walk through it. Lena Carter walked through it. She did not walk through it the way a woman in a movie walks through it, gracefully, without doubt, with her hair lifting in some invisible wind. She walked through it badly and clumsily and angrily sometimes, and with Gina telling her to be careful, and with her mother telling her from somewhere to keep the part of herself that had learned to stand alone, and with a man named Martin Hale trying to shove her back through it. She walked through it anyway. She walked through it, and she kept walking, and at some point the door was behind her, and the life was in front of her, and she was simply living it. That is, in the end, all any of us get to do. Walk through, keep going. Love the person who is walking next to you, imperfectly, for as long as you both get to walk. Stay.